Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Harvey Seifter. We always try to bring the highest quality speakers to you, and Harvey is no exception. I just want to give you a little bit of his background, and it's significant. And the message he'll impart with us today, I think it will resonate on all of us. Harvey is a globally respected leader in innovation, creativity, and future-ready leadership development. As founder and director of Creating Futures at Work, he designs and delivers transformative learning experience that equips leaders and teams to thrive in today's complex, fast-changing world. His work blends the precision of science with the insight of emotional depth of the arts and the proprietary ABLE system, arts-based and experiential learning system methodology built over a decade of science, National Science Foundation funded research that strengthens activity, collaboration, creative problem solving, and resilience. Before establishing Creative Futures at Work, Harvey developed the leadership mindset and innovative skills of more than 25,000 leaders at GE's Global Leadership Development Center. He's a classically trained musician and has led arts organizations and has garnered multiple Grammy Awards and the Kennedy Center Award. In 2008, he founded the Art of Science Learning, a highly regarded initiative that uses art-based approach to spark innovation across science, technology, and education. Harvey's work has influenced leaders across sectors and continents, helping them unlock creativity, strengthen team performance, and build futures at work. With that, take it away, Harvey. The screen is yours.
Joe, thank you. Good morning, everybody, or depending on where you are in the world, afternoon or evening. Thank you so much for inviting me here today, and it's really a pleasure and a privilege to spend some time. And thanks for being here. I'm going to put my screen up here. And I'll call your attention to the title here, Elevate Your Entrepreneurial Edge. We probably all are engaged around that because that's why we're here today, with arts-based experiential learning. For some of you, that may resonate. For others of you, you may be kind of looking at that and maybe scratching your head a little bit. What is the connection between arts-based experiential learning and entrepreneurial edge? In fact, what is arts-based experiential learning? So let me unpack that for just a moment because it's really very simple and straightforward. What we're talking about is experiencing art, all of the art forms, and experiencing them to learn from them. So that's really what we do, is we work with the arts. It's fun, it's interesting, it's enjoyable, it's engaging, but it's also a source of really rich, powerful learning, which has a lot to do with entrepreneurship. So I'm going to suggest a few basic connections there, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how those connections can apply to what you do. So I'm going to invite you to take a good look at this image for a moment. I call it a typical view of the world. This is an eye tracking study. The yellow line is the eyeball of the person looking at the image. And I call it typical because there are hundreds of images in this study, and this is how pretty much everybody looks at it. And there have been many such studies over the years. This is how most of us look at the world most of the time. So there are a couple of things we can say about this typical view of the world. We typically don't see very much of the world when we look at it. If you look carefully at this image here, the yellow line is, the eyeball is touching maybe 8% of the image. The second thing is we look in some highly predictable places. A lot in the center, especially it looks like maybe there's a figure of a person back there. That always draws our attention. We do a quick check of the periphery to make sure we're not missing out on anything too important. And that's kind of what we typically see. So this is your brain on art. This is what happens to your brain and your eyeball when you spend time doing the things that art students do. Thinking about art, looking at art, making art. You learn a lot about art, of course, but it changes the way you see the world. You learn to see the world differently. A couple of things about the difference. First, you see much more of the world. You look at how the art student is looking at that image, they're maybe taking in 30 or 35% of the image instead of 8 or 10%. Second, it looks kind of like a crazy quilt. It's not predictable. The person is learned to look at what interests them, what they're curious about, to explore, to experiment, to go with impulse and intuition. So the implication on what you begin to see, to learn, and how you begin to grow as a person is pretty clear. But now think about the implication for your team or your business. Instead of just drilling down on that same 8 to 10% of the information where everybody is seeing it the same way, now you're bringing people together and covering the world. Okay, so from that, let's talk a little bit about what art does to help you connect with the world. So this is a meta study. It brings together 40 neuroimaging studies. It was done over a 20-year period. And what it's showing us is that inside the brain, when we experience art, we're triggering some shared areas where the brain also is active when it's experiencing empathy. In other words, we're looking at what the key circuits in the brain are doing. They're lighting up not just individual circuits, but actually whole systems of circuits called neural substrates. When we use art, we're triggering common substrates with empathy. So it's kind of a door into that. The third thing is from how we connect on that level to how we actually connect on the ground, in teams, with markets, with customers, in real life. There's this powerful relationship between art and emotionally intelligent behavior, real collaboration. So this is actually data from my own lab out in San Diego, an experimental research that we did. And what we did is we worked with teams that were working on really difficult challenges. And these teams were working together over a 5-week period. And as they were working collaboratively, we were also really tracking their behaviors, counting them, coding all of them. And this is what we found. This is sort of typically how people engage on teams. So their emotionally intelligent behaviors start kind of weak, but they grow fairly quickly. But they grow to a limited degree, and then all the problems with teams start kicking in. And so we have a hard time sometimes getting beyond that. So it plateaus. So this was an experimental study. We composed another set of teams, identically composed. So the same demographics, the same age groups, the same professional backgrounds, the same types of work that they were doing. We put them to work on the same problems and the same challenges, using the same techniques and methodologies. We even fed them the same snacks at the same time of the day. There was one difference, though. With the experimental teams, we took 9 hours out of that 5-week time, and we had them experience art in different ways. Look at what happened. The emotionally intelligent behaviors on the experimental teams just soared. 9 hours of art over a 5-week period, and look at these differences. The emotionally intelligent behaviors were occurring at roughly triple the rate by the end of that time. So these are really kind of powerful points. And if you think about what we do every day as entrepreneurs in our businesses, in our social entrepreneurship, and the way that we engage with our communities, with our peers and colleagues, with customers, with markets, the ability to actually see more of the world, to connect with it more deeply, to translate that into emotionally intelligent behaviors, this is really powerful stuff. This is, in fact, entrepreneurial edge. So what we're going to talk about for a few minutes this morning is what can you do with that? How can you apply all of this to the challenges and the opportunities of entrepreneurship? And that's a big topic. We're not going to go into all of that. But what I'd like to share with you are 2 strategies, 2 ways of thinking about that. So first, let's just take a quick look at these 4 people here. So you look at them and, if you ask yourself the question, what do these 4 people have in common? Well, of course, none of them are alive, and we have black and white photos and there's all that kind of thing. But when we get a little bit beyond that, we'll go a little bit deeper. These are 4 people that saw the world differently, connected with the world differently, and changed the world. They left the world in a profoundly different place than what they found it. And in fact, if you think about entrepreneurship and go beyond what it means to be an entrepreneur in your business, and now think about what it means to be an entrepreneur in your community, in your life, and how you view the world around you. These people were truly entrepreneurs. They changed the world. So something else that they all had in common, they all spent a huge amount of their adult lives doing something not obviously related to what they're famous for. They made art. Einstein was a violinist. He practiced 4 hours a day. He said all his life. He said a lot of his most important insights came to him that way. Helen Keller was a vaudevillian. She barnstormed the world. She said it was her favorite thing that she'd ever done. Frederick Douglass, he was a polymath. So, like Einstein, he was a violinist. He was also a poet. A lot of the political writings that he's most famous for first took shape and began to crystallize in the form of his poetry. Churchill was a watercolorist. He captured intricate facets of the world around him and integrated them into whole pictures. So, four people whose truly entrepreneurial edge changed the world, and all of them were involved in a deep way with art. That's an interesting correlation. Let's take a look at what happens when we expand the sample size from four people to all the people in history who ever won the Nobel Prize. So what we're looking at here is how these people spent their leisure time. And we're comparing the Nobel Prize winners with other really distinguished scientists who did important work, made discoveries, inventions, patents, won awards, published important papers and books, but they weren't associated with the kind of breakthrough innovation, what we might think of as the entrepreneurial edge, that these people were. And what we see is that the Nobel Prize winners were 17 times more likely in their spare time to paint, 25 times more likely to write fiction, 22 times more likely to play a musical instrument, act in an amateur theatrical, sing in a community choir. So deep, deep connections. So I'm going to share some thoughts about a first strategy of how you can apply all of this to your entrepreneurial edge, and that is to develop your skill of intuition. Again, I want you to take a moment to register that headline because we don't often think of intuition as a skill. If we think of it at all, it's this maybe semi-mystical thing that happens out there. But let's put it in a little bit of context, what this is, why it matters. So this is maybe the world that you wake up to in the morning and how you think you see it. And sitting out there, there's that iceberg floating there. And you can really see that iceberg pretty clearly. And if you can't see it clearly, you've got a lot of tools and a lot of experience to help you see it clearly. So you can make logical deductions about it. You can measure it. You can analyze it. You can be pretty sure that thing is sitting there and you pretty much understand what it is. Of course, there's more to the picture. And here we go with the part that you can't see. And of course, what you can't see can hurt you. So we're kind of blind to what's happening down there. Down there, I'm going to call that the realm of intuitive knowledge. Our logical, clear, purposeful, analytical, measurable, rational ways of thinking and instruments and experience, they're not going to help us so much down there. But we do want to kind of get at what's down there. And we want to get at it for two reasons. The first, of course, is kind of obvious. We don't want to end up like the Titanic and run into the thing and be shipwrecked. But there's another reason, too. Down there, that's 90% of the idea space. That's 90% of the realm of possibility. That's where the opportunity lies. That's where the future is. Einstein said, all great achievements start from that intuitive knowledge. So anything that can give us access to that, that's powerful information. That's powerful information about ourselves, about the world around us, about our future, and about where we want to go and how we can get there. So some of you may know Daniel Kahneman. For those of you who don't, I can't recommend this book highly enough. Thinking Fast and Slow. Kahneman was a Nobel laureate. He's an economist as well as a psychologist who's done deep work on psychology of decision making and behavior and all kinds of things. And he talked a lot about what he called the two systems of thinking. System one and system slow. System one and system two. System one is really fast. System two is really slow. System one can easily lead us off course. System two brings us back to course. Okay. So Kahneman talked a lot about intuition, and I'm going to boil down the most relevant things that he said to what we're talking about today into a few very simple statements. First, intuition is pattern recognition. We live in a world that's filled with patterns. We don't necessarily think about, realize, recognize the kinds of patterns that it's filled in, but constantly. And not just the obvious patterns, not just the patterns of our own behavior or the patterns that we see in nature of repeating form. And these things are really important, but we're talking about patterns in space, patterns in time, patterns in cause and effect. There are all kinds of patterns that we live in. We live in a world filled with pattern, and intuition is the ability to recognize more of them. The second thing that he said is that most judgments in action are actually governed by intuitive thought. We don't even realize the extent to which we're using our intuition constantly. But he spent decades studying how people make decisions, how they make choices, how they think they're making them, and how they're really making them. And his conclusion is that most judgments are actually governed by intuition. But there's a third thing that he tells us. Most intuition is wrong. That's true of system one thinking. It's blindingly fast and it's really wrong most of the time. And I know lots of us like to feel that, we're very intuitive. And so our gut is telling us something. So we follow our intuition. And that's great. But just know that you're going to follow it in the wrong direction 90% of the time. But that sentence isn't complete because he said something else. He said, most intuition is wrong, but if it comes from prolonged experience with immediate feedback, you can get a lot better at it. And that is a really decisive insight. Prolonged experience and immediate feedback, those are the keys to actually developing your intuition. Okay, so what Kahneman said is that intuition isn't a mystical talent, it's a skill. You can hone it, you can develop it over time. So these are a few of the basic principles of how you can do that and how art relates to it. First, observe the world carefully and intentionally. That is the most important thing you can do. And when I say observe, I mean use all the senses. So yes, observe with your eyes, but observe with your ears. Touch, taste, smell, feel and sense the world in as many ways as you can, as often as you can, and do it carefully and intentionally. So make a point of doing it. Go out of your way to do it. Reflect on what you're observing. Learn to recognize when you're observing it. That's the beginning of developing that skill. Second, learn to tune out all the noise that makes it actually hard for you to see the underlying patterns. The world is filled with noise, distractions, and we all know that every day that goes by, every new piece of technology, every new update to an app, every new connection that we make, every new everything is adding to the noise. We love all those things, we want them, but we have to also then begin to recognize what's pure noise here and how do we actually sort of tune that out enough so that we can really see the world. That's critically important. Third, prediction comes with practice. That was Kahneman's phrase. Prediction comes with practice. If you want to be able to predict what's going to happen, practice it. Practice, practice, practice. So when we think about intuition, it gives us access by seeing these patterns. There's one thing about a pattern. Once you understand the pattern, you can begin to predict with a great deal of reliability what's going to happen next. So if we want to get more accurate in our predictions, if we want our intuitions to be more useful and less often failed, we really have to practice it. And practice it with real-time feedback. So check ourselves. Don't assume that what you're seeing is what you think you're seeing. Don't assume that your intuition is leading you in the right direction. On the contrary, check that intuition constantly. Was I right or was I wrong? And be honest with yourself, because in the beginning, you're going to find out that most of the time you're wrong. And that's good news. Don't shy away from that. Every time you find out that you've been wrong, you begin the process of then learning. What did I do? What did I see? How do I get better at it next time? And then keep replying what you're learning, doing that. That's what actually trains your skill. And use the arts because they're a uniquely powerful way to do this. So I'm going to give you one very quick example of why the arts are a uniquely powerful way to do this. And to do that, I'm going to show you, this is a very famous painting by Gustave Caillebotte. French painter, 1870s. It's a rainy day in Paris is the name of it. And this painting is often associated with the birth of modern urbanism as we live in it today in cities all over the world. So I want you to take a good look at that painting. It has this sort of interesting power to it. As you look at it, there are like lots of details. Somehow they seem like they fit together. They don't even seem that widely ranging, and yet there's a lot of things going on here. So I'm going to give you another view of that same painting. So this is actually what you're seeing. You're seeing this, which is composed of this, which your eye begins to decode and understand. And the more you look at it, the more you see those patterns. So what are these patterns telling you? We're seeing an awful lot of triangles. Things are being arrayed in triangular forms. Not everything is. There are some structural things in a few key places that aren't. But boy, those triangles are present and important. And we can actually start looking carefully and predicting where we're going to find the ones that actually aren't outlined that way. So let's look a little bit more at this painting. Let's split it in two. Okay, here it is. It's cut in half. So these are each nice, but somehow they're kind of less interesting than when we put them together. When we put them together, the patterns in one part begin to echo on the other side, and we see more of both sides. Exactly the same visual information, but now we're in the world of the pattern. So these patterns are everywhere. We live in them, and as I said, they're not only in painting, they're in every aspect of life. They're in time, they're in space, they're in motion, all of these things. The more we understand them, the more we're training our skill of intuition, and the benefits of training our skill of intuition can be very powerful. Let's talk about the benefits for business. First of all, intuition increases your ability to see around corners because intuition allows us to see the future, which is emerging or trying to emerge. The benefit to you, think of how much your decision making will improve when your ability to see around corners grows. Intuition gives you key insights, and it gives them to you blindingly fast. That's the thing about Kahneman's system one thinking. You get it immediately. You don't sit around and reflect about it and sort of weigh it and check it and all those kinds of things. You've got it. It's there for you. That speed, those insights at speed, can give you enormous competitive advantage if you've trained your skill enough that you're getting better at getting the noise out of the picture and making your predictions more accurate. Third, it detects opportunities and it also detects dangers and risks before they become obvious. So the benefit of intuition to you and to your business is it's an early warning system. And finally, it reveals what's behind the surfaces of people and situations. You can make intuitive judgments about people. And the benefit to you, of course, is now you begin to have a better insight into when and to who you should give trust and when not to. So again, intuition it's system one thinking. It's always going to be inaccurate more often than it's accurate. But for those of you who follow baseball, and I'm gonna use a baseball metaphor here. Think of being and for those of you who don't, in baseball we talk about somebody's batting average, which is nothing more than the percentage of time when they come up to take a swing with their bat and they actually get on base and advance. Okay, a real star, an all-star, somebody who's might be on their way to the Hall of Fame. Maybe they have a 320 batting average. That means that 32% of the time they're up there. They're swinging, they're connecting, they're advancing. It also means that 68% of them are not. So even the best, the greatest players in history, 65% of the time, they miss. But think of the difference between that all-star and now the guy who can't get in the starting lineup of the last place team. His batting average might be 200, 180. So that's not such a huge difference, actually. It's the difference between connecting 20% of the time and connecting 30% of the time. It doesn't seem so big, but think of how big that difference is. Think of how that can apply to you in your skill of intuition and your ability to apply those insights to your business. So that's really kind of the strategy that I wanted to share with you. The first one about how you can use the arts to help develop your skill of intuition and why that in turn strengthens your entrepreneurial edge. I'm going to give you one more strategy, and that is learn to collaborate with AI. Once again, I want you to look at that title because to work with AI, that seems pretty obvious. We pretty much all are doing it all the time and trying constantly to figure out how to do it better and more effectively and how to use the latest tools and how the latest applications. But collaborate with AI. That implies something a little different than just working with it. It's actually implying that AI is more than just a tool. It's a partner. So why do we want to collaborate with AI? So the first thing is when we collaborate, we surface AI's greatest strengths. We can use AI as just a tool. We can give it, some simple prompts and have it go do tasks for us that we don't feel like doing for ourselves, or we think that it can do it faster, or, sort of almost mechanical tasks, repetitive tasks. Okay? Just like we can use our phones to make phone calls and nothing else. We can do that. They do that. But we're not really leveraging the opportunity that this piece of technology brings us. And collaboration is what surfaces AI's greatest strengths, because what makes AI different from earlier tools and different kinds of tools is that it actually can collaborate, that it actually can work with us and not just follow our instructions. It can lead us as well as follow. And that's really kind of critical because all collaboration begins with the recognition that everybody is a leader sometimes, and everybody is a follower, because without followers, there are no leaders. So you have to be sometimes. And how you sort that out is what we call collaborative culture. And now we're talking about a way that you don't relate to your other tools. You don't sort of, sit down at your desktop any more than you get out your hacksaw and say, is this tool going to lead me today? But in fact, if we want to use AI's greatest strengths, we have to be ready for it to lead as well as to follow. That means we have to be ready to follow it as well as to lead it. And of course, we also know that collaboration surfaces humanity's greatest strengths. As entrepreneurs, that's something that many of us, I know I personally have struggled with that throughout my life, and many entrepreneurs, I'd say most do in my experience, because part of the entrepreneurial energy that we bring is we don't want to collaborate, we want to do things. And one thing that we all know as humans is one thing that we all share: we have the best ideas. And of course, sometimes we do. And sometimes our best idea might be to hear somebody else's idea. And the development of true collaboration has always surfaced humanity's greatest strengths, as well as now surfacing AI's greatest strengths. So I'm thinking about AI not just as a tool, but as a partner. And I want to take that one step further. When we think about tools, we think about implementation of things. But AI isn't just an implementer. And that means it's also just not an implementer of what we ask it to do. It's an innovator. So what do we mean by innovation? We mean with innovation, and this grows out of actually all of our research over decades, and looking at hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of innovation processes and innovation experiences in different environments, global corporations and small community-based neighborhood innovation in the United States and around the world, in education, in nonprofits, in technology, in research, in manufacturing, every possible dimension. Innovation happens when three things are present. One, something new is going on. We'll call it novelty. If it's not, it might be many things, but it obviously, isn't innovation. Okay. So we know that something new has to be happening. But that something new, it has to have impact. It has to have impact on in some place that matters, that is achieving either the result that we wanted to achieve, or we're learning that it achieves a different result maybe than we intended, but a good one. Okay? So it has to have novelty and it has to have impact. But it has to have one other thing. It has to have value. And value, as we all know, has to be measured in business, in entrepreneurship. We can measure value by sales, by strength in the market, by a million metrics that we have to do that. But that market is critical. But I also want to be clear that when we talk about the market, it's a pretty wide-ranging market. So it's sure the financial markets, but let's say that your innovation requires lots of volunteers to get on board and help. Well, then you have to be competitive in the volunteer market. So you may need to be competitive in the market of suppliers, in the market of ideas. So it's not just the financial markets, but in one way or another, value means that other people think that the idea is worth investing in, whether they're investing time, money, resources, capital, whatever it might be. So AI is truly an innovator in that it generates things that are new. It generates things that have impact, and it generates things that add value. Of course, it does a lot of other things too, and not everything that AI generates has any of those things, which is a huge part of why collaboration is so critical. We've been doing a little bit of research in a recent period. My company, Creating Futures That Work, one of the things that we do is we certify and train innovation coaches who work with leaders and executives and in different domains. And we have our certified innovation coaches all over the world. And I've been asking them lately to share with us what they're experiencing about AI in their coaching, in the leaders that they're working with. What's emerging? What's coming to the surface here in the use of AI? What's valuable to know? And what I'm struck by, we looked at dozens of different coaching behaviors and types of ways in which leaders seek to benefit from coaching. And we looked at dozens of coaches and how they applied. So we had, hundreds of data points there. And roughly 50% of those data points tell us that coaches already believe that the single most effective way that they can do what's always been a profoundly and exclusively human experience is through collaboration with AI. About 10% of the data points, the coaches are telling us it should be purely AI. About 40%, they believe, at least at this point, they should be purely human. But the majority, or at least half of them, are telling us that the future and the strength and the capability lies in collaboration with AI. So the challenge here is, if we're going to collaborate with AI, how do you do that? I mean, that's a great slogan, collaborate with AI. But we're not necessarily kind of set up to understand what that means or how can we approach that. So these are just three thoughts that I'm going to leave you with about what it means today to begin to collaborate with AI. The first is to ask better questions. So there's a common bit of, sort of general wisdom that you can find on LinkedIn in 1,000 posts every day, which is that what this means is learn the prompts and learn the right prompts and the right sequence of prompts. And I'm going to suggest that that's part of the picture, but that's a little bit like that obvious tip of the iceberg that everybody sees. It's not what lies beneath it. What lies beneath it, if you want to sort of do great prompts, be clear with yourself. What are you trying to do? What is it that you're trying to actually learn, or how are you trying to grow, or what do you want to co-create with your AI, and how is that going to help you in the market? How is that going to help your business as an entrepreneur? So asking better questions comes long before write the right set of prompts and this is how you do it. And we've been working on research around this actually going back a decade now, that even before large language models emerged, where it's become increasingly clear that the relationship between humans and AI functions in direct proportion to the ability of the human to ask better questions, not just write good prompts. And asking better questions, that takes inquiry, it takes curiosity, it takes careful observation of the world, it takes reflection. These are all the things that we've been talking about already that the arts bring us. As entrepreneurs, we can use our work with the arts to help us learn, to ask better questions, to collaborate more effectively with AI. Second, we can bridge the human machine gaps, and we can do it through empathy. So, Kevin Kelly wrote a really powerful, important book going back 15 years, What Technology Wants. I have it sitting next to me on the desk here. And it was such a shocking phrase at the time. Technology doesn't want anything. My toaster doesn't want anything. But in fact, of course, the more we learn, the more we study, technology wants. And it's not that we have to be governed by what technology wants, although increasingly, whether we like it or not, that's coming into play. But as with all empathy, if we can understand what technology wants, we can begin to communicate more effectively with technology. We can begin to shape the collaboration in a way that's going to be a better experience for the AI. And if it's a better experience for the AI, we're far more likely to bridge our gaps with them, to be able to work together, to collaborate on the solutions we're trying to create, which in turn will give us strength in our markets. So, bridging the human machine gaps through empathy, it's not something we usually think about. We think about the importance of empathy and understanding our customers and maybe understanding our colleagues and all kinds of things. But our machines, our algorithms, our AI, but in fact, how much power is there in that? Third, if we take that one step further, we can actually begin to create human machine ensembles. I'm using the word ensemble intentionally. Ensemble is simply a small group of people who are working together collaboratively in a very intense, focused, open way, which is characterized by a flow state. We all know what flow is in life, and at least for the last quarter of a century in business, after Csikszentmihalyi's work on it, we know how important flow is to actually engagement and outcomes. We can create ensembles, and those ensembles, which are made up of both humans and machine, can help us problem solve and iterate and innovate. When we do that as purely humans, what we're doing is we're exercising these waves of thought. And a wave of thought consists of divergent thought. We think of lots of possibilities. And then convergent thought. We apply criteria in critical thinking and we make decisions. And we tend to do that in the world of innovation in pairs of these waves. The first pair we call what's the problem? The second part of the pair we call how do I want to solve it? If we can find ways to work with our AIs so that we can essentially team together and create these ensembles, we will problem solve better, we will iterate faster and with more power and impact, and we will change our world. So these are just a few thoughts on these two strategies and how the arts relate to all of it. I'm going to pull out of this. I apologize I just threw a lot of words at you very fast. So let's all take a breath. And I'd love to hear what you think about all this.
All right. Well, now's your time to ask questions, give your yeah buts, what abouts. What do you mean intuition can make a difference in business? And it's funny, Harvey, because I learned this lesson a lot younger than most people learn to listen to my intuition in business. And I think sometimes we don't trust it,
It's
or we're taught not to trust it even sometimes, rather than build it as a skill like any muscle, right?
exactly. It's a really hard subject because first we get lots of input and feedback from in the business world, especially. Well, that's all very nice, but Where's the evidence, and why are you
Bottom
doing
line,
it?
bottom line, bottom line.
Right. And at the same time, it's also a hard subject because if we're honest with ourselves, we know our intuitions are usually wrong. We may not think that at first. So I encourage you, if you think that your intuition is always right or almost always right, I encourage you to track it for a week. Take a journal, and every time you have an intuitive insight, write it down in the moment. Because what we tend to do as time passes, we sort of forget about the intuitions that we had along the way that life just kind of proved, no, that's not right. We have cognitive biases. We all want to be right. We all love the evidence that shows that we're good at that. But if we're really
Right.
honest, we'll find out that we're wrong most of the time. But once we start to train it, we can become right much more.
And people use it and don't realize they're using it. So we're just going to bring this back to a networking framework, everybody, is that you guys all use your networking intuition every time you go to a networking event. There's little groups you avoid and little groups you're drawn to, and that's all your intuition at work. Okay. So we're going to give you a chance. First of all, Harvey, thank you so much for being here to give us this information because I've started to learn that as I get older and more experience in business, my intuition is more and more and more important.
It sure
And
is.
following it is more important. So if you have more questions for Harvey, Harvey's going to place all of his information in the chat in a few moments. Okay. So, just when we're back from networking, the information will be there for you and you won't have lost it. We're also going to send you the information separately in an email so you don't have to worry about that either. Okay. Awesome. 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 Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, everybody, our next component is a networking component. Colin, how many rooms do we have? Colin will let me know as soon as he can.
8. We have 8 rooms.
We have
Yep.
8 rooms. So you're going to be in a room with a bunch of other people. And there's a room host for your room, right, Colin? There's a room host for every room.
Yes. Yes. Sure.
Fantastic. So you're going to arrive in your room and there's a room host in your room. And your room host is going to demonstrate how to introduce yourself because some of you still don't follow instructions. Okay. So the room host is going to demonstrate what it looks like to introduce yourself and get to know a bunch more people. All right. So please be prepared to be moved into or accept the prompt to move into your room. Colin, how many minutes do they have in this room?
12 minutes.
12 minutes you're going to be in this room for everybody to get a chance. A minute each, okay? Don't be stingy, but don't overly communicate until everybody's gone at least once, okay? Fantastic. Thank you, Colin. Please open the rooms. Colin, so smart
Most of the time.
most of the time. All right, let's get these other 3 people there. I don't know if these are truly your names or are they just not accepting the prompts?
They're not accepting the prompts. They're shown
Okay,
as
great.
being
Go ahead and put them in the waiting room then. No problem.
joined, but they're not. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have difficulty navigating enough buttons when
Oh, there
they're,
we go.
or
And then on
sometimes
that
it takes an
turn
extra
off,
long time for them to go to their room. Or
I could
sometimes they're
bounce.
in the room and we're just a ghost, they're a ghost person in our room.
I'll bounce. I'll bounce.
Yeah.
Or not.
So Colin will try to, oh yes, why can't you unmute? Here you go.
There we go. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to say something a little out there.
Yeah, don't put me in a room.
Yes, well, after don't put you in the room.
Yeah.
Let's
Mhm.
get, hold on, let's get this person into,
Yeah, he didn't. He's not
because he's not
doing it.
responding.
Yeah.
The great part is we, in order to love the content, we don't necessarily have to like the person delivering the content at any given time. I was talking to somebody the other day and he just came across as a swarmy car salesman when he was speaking, right? But his content was amazing, right? And what Harvey says is so amazing. And, he just has a New York style of delivering, but it's like he's trying too hard to not offend somebody or something. I don't know what it is, but he's great. I mean, his stuff is so good and he's so smart and, it's clear, but it
Quote
just took a
from
little.
best
Hello,
quote.
Crystal. Welcome. So, Crystal, are you prepared? Let's unmute Crystal.
Crystal's from Uber. I know her. She comes to our Sylvia meeting.
Yeah, Crystal. I asked her to unmute.
Funny, what I prepared actually dovetails perfectly with Harvey, which is irritating on so many levels.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's perfect.